Welcome. This podcast is an exploration into being human and what's possible when there's less attention on the noise in our heads. Warning. While listening to this broadcast, you may experience moments of deep peace, sighs of relief, personal insights, or long stretches of dead air. Do not be afraid. This is normal. Under the Noise with Wyn Morgan and Kate Roberts.
Welcome to Under the Noise. I'm Kate Roberts, and I'm here with my co-host Wyn Morgan. Hi, Wyn.
Hello. Good to be with you.
Oh, good. So we were chit-chatting before we hit record, and we had gotten an email from one of our listeners about beliefs. And you and I were talking about beliefs in general, but also beliefs about everything in everyday life that sometimes we don't even realize are our beliefs until we see them. And so for our listeners, we thought it would be interesting to get into a conversation about beliefs. Beliefs as thought that we've been thinking for a really long time, but often we don't even realize we have beliefs.
You then mentioned, there are so many things that we don't know that we have, going back to what you said, such as what time to go to bed, what time's good to get up, all these kind of things. And in listening to you just now, well, I notice I have beliefs about coffee. Right, I'm going to take it right down to kind of like basics and something so earthy as coffee. And for years, about a decade, I didn't drink caffeinated coffee because I thought it was bad for me. Well, that was a belief. And in running a training course in Colombia, the head of the company that I was doing some work with said, "You got to try this coffee when it's delicious." And I said, "I don't drink coffee. I don't drink caffeinated coffee." He said, "It's really good." Fourth day, I relented and I had a cup of it and I went, "Oh my Lord, this is so tasty, so good." And I was hopping around like an idiot because I hadn't had caffeine in so long, but I loved it. So I had another cup. Anyway, this is kind of 9-10 years ago. Well, now I've got a belief that I can't function in the morning until I've had a coffee. Now, I don't know if there's any truth in any of it. I don't know. I know there is such a thing as caffeine. I know I really enjoy the taste of coffee right now. But it is funny, isn't it? Something as simple as that is an illustration of how seemingly solid and invisible my beliefs are. Well, that one's always been a little bit more visible than other things. So as soon as you said, what time we go to bed and how much sleep to have, and in our chit chat we talked about that as well. Because I would imagine that there are absolutely bundles of unconscious beliefs I have about me, about life, about other people, about things, but I just don't know that they're even there. And a few weeks ago, when we had Orit as a guest, and we talked about invisible rules. Yeah, I've got bunches of them that are invisible.
And when was the last time that you realize that you were holding on to a belief that you didn't realize that you had? When was the last time it occurred to you that you're like, oh, I do have a belief about this? But you had to see it to realize that you did.
It was about a person, and it's not someone I know personally. And I can't remember exactly who, but sometime in the last 2 weeks. And I'm pretty sure it's an American football player, it's an NFL player. And I didn't like him. And then I heard him talk and I went, what a really class guy. And I changed my mind. But I didn't know I was so fixed in my mind about that person. I didn't know I'd kind of broad brushed my unconscious biases across that person and probably lots of other things about that person too, about that person's team, about maybe that person's family. I don't know. But it was just one of those things that I went, wow, for me to think he's a class act, I must have thought he wasn't at some point. And it just became really visible to me. But clearly not that visible because I can't remember exactly. What. How about you?
I feel like lately I've been in a place, I don't know, the last year or so, where I see them all the time. Big and small, they just show up in these ways that I'm seeing them. And I don't control that. It's almost like seeing them isn't really up to me. And I think that that's why like being human and doing life is so special. Although, you know, a lot of people in spiritual circles, they get really frustrated with our humanity, you know, like the things that make us human and when we don't see things. And lately, whenever my daughter is asking me what I'm doing, I'll make a joke and I just say, hey, I'm lifing over here. Just, I'm doing my thing. I'm lifing. She's like, you're lifing? I'm like, yeah, I'm lifing. I'm just living my life. And, but it's in life and being human. I think that those things get pointed out to us. Or we see it, or we hear the thoughts that are silent up until a certain point. So I'll give you an example. I realized that somewhere in my thoughts, in my belief systems that I've picked up along the way, doing things around the house or for family or dishes or things like that, in my mind don't have as much value as helping other people somehow.
Mm.
Like those simple acts. Somewhere I picked up along the way, they don't have as much value as other things where I'm helping or serving in some way. And I don't think that's true. Not for me, at least. That there's a beautiful act of service in that. And that's just one example where I start to see, somehow I don't think this has value like other things. Like there's a scale of value for me, which is starting to fall away. What did you hear? You heard something.
I did, and it had nothing to do with what you were talking about.
Of course.
It just popped in about the answer to the question that you asked me a few minutes earlier about when was the last time. And as you know, I'm doing a writing class, and this is my fifth writing class, and each one is 8 weeks long. And every week I read out one of the pieces that I've written since the previous class. Well, I often think they suck. I often think I'm not very good at this. I often think that there's nothing original in what I say and what I write. Well, that's not what other people think. There's just a lot of... So that as an example, I bump up against my unconscious beliefs every Tuesday. And that's an understatement about the rest of the week, because I'm pretty sure I bump up against that every hour I'm awake, I would imagine, for 7 days a week. I bump up against something. And here's the bit that I love in what you said as well, is that I want to bump up against something, but I don't want to be immune either. I want to like my being an idiot. No, I'm not saying I don't like it, because I actually start to accept my humanity, going back to what you said, an awful lot more than I probably have done ever. And that includes my being a, innocent idiot. That happens countless times a day. Or another way of saying it, I don't want to be spiritually bypassed. I don't want to be floating on a cloud. I don't want to think everything's okay all the time. I don't want to not be tricked by thought. I do not want to have this life experience without it being a life experience. Now, I used to think, and stop me if I'm going off on too much of a tangent, right? Or if I'm not making sense. I used to think that the goal that was there for me to understand how my mind works and how life really is was that I would not feel emotional pain. I would not feel physical pain. I would bypass all the nasty things in life. That's what I thought. Well, that was one that I know is A, not possible, and B, not a goal I want either. because life is not that way. And for me to want to have a life that isn't how life is, doesn't make any sense anymore. So I find it easier to be an idiot and to laugh at myself and to find this whole experience of being alive absurd, as opposed to float above it and not be impacted by things that would impact me. Now, the depth to which I'm suffer, I think, is different. And you and I have talked at length about what that means for me and what it means for you in our previous 50 plus episodes of this podcast. So what am I saying? I'm going to constantly have beliefs that are invisible, that look like truth as opposed to thought-created illusions. And it's not something that I need to overcome. However, it's really helpful to notice that I'm making them up. But that doesn't mean stop making them up. It means, hey, look how you work. You make stuff up and it looks solid. Oh. I think there was at some point in one of the conversations recently that we've had on this podcast, I think it was with Bob a few weeks earlier, a few episodes ago, where I noticed that I had been trying to sanitize my life and keep it safe. Keep the highs not too high and keep the lows not too low. And I hadn't realized I was still doing that. I knew I used to do that a lot and try to do that. It makes a lot less sense now to sanitize my life. And a little more okay to live it, regardless of how I feel, what I make up, what I struggle with, what I find in flow with. So that's what I think right now, anyway.
Thought while you were talking that, we see these beliefs show up. And when we start to really kind of understand how experience works, they naturally fall away. Things like sanitizing. That's the word you used, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
That had so much value for you when you needed it to. Much value is seeing your belief fall away. I love that because we change and things fall away like that. I think we have this tendency to judge how much we saw before as not enough, as this what we're seeing now. There's a perfection to what we're seeing at any given moment. It's not on us to see I think it's enough. Feels like enough. Whereas at certain points, it didn't feel that way. Like I was seeking, I was wanting something better or different or more.
Yeah.
But there was a perfection to that. That was enough too for where I was. Life has us. It has us. Life always does.
It does. It does.
No matter what we're seeing or not seeing.
And feeling or not feeling, and wanting and not wanting. Because there was a lovely, well, all of what you said was lovely as a nice reminder as well. And I noticed that at one point when you were talking about perfection, what is? The only way that perfection can and can't exist is via judgment. And that's thought. Thought appearing real would cause judgment. Well, there's no escape from that. So that's fine too. So even judging judgment makes less sense, which leaves us with living. As is, regardless of what the is. Somewhere that made sense to me in my head anyway. I don't think it really does when it's said out loud, although there's something there.
Part of our beliefs, I think, at least for me, is what I've decided has value and how much value. including my own value
Mm.
as a human being. What gives me value? And I'm starting to find a place and really discovering its value. It's the space of not knowing. And when I drop into that space, when all my judgments kind of fall away for just a second, like maybe even less than that, that space of not knowing is so beautiful and empty. It's full all at the same time. I don't know how to explain that. When I don't know, and I know I don't, under belief and judgment, I truly know value in that space. My value, the value of whatever experience I'm having, no matter what it is. The value of not seeing, the value of seeing. All of that is all in the space. I don't know. When I sit in that space, the knowing finds me. I don't find it. Truth finds me there.
What occurred to me as you were sharing that was it comes back to one more time. It comes back to the feeling. And if I'm feeling off, or I'm feeling judgy, or I'm feeling I need to see more, it's a feeling that I've made something up. Now, there may be something to look at. It might not be. And if there is something to look at, often the space of not knowing, which is what you've just said, is the place to relax into. And then the okayness comes back, the feeling of okayness, regardless of what's happening in life and what we're making up about ourselves and value or anything else, any other story that is, or a belief that is hanging around, known or unknown, conscious or unconscious. There's something really cool in the simplicity of just noticing that feeling tells us everything. And the knowing that there's nothing that needs to be done about that.
You taught me that when?
us hanging out taught you that? I had to see that for myself in the same way that you did. And in our kind of chit chat before you hit record today, it's something that came up there about space for ourselves to kind of clear and see. I think we've both been blessed by people who have been pointing that out to us in really gentle and sometimes less than gentle ways. But then we bump up against the truth of that, and then life's different because of it. And if you're listening and getting a sense of the feeling of peace, that. Nothing else.
Thank you, Wim.
Thank you, Kate. That was beautiful. Thank you.
You've been listening to Under the Noise. I'm Kate Roberts, and I'm here with Win Morgan. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for topics, please reach out to us. Our details follow the podcast. See you soon. Bye. Thanks for joining us. We'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have a topic or question that you'd like us to chat about, email Win or Kate at win@winning.co.uk and kate@katerobertscoaching.com. Until then, enjoy what's possible under the noise.